Good evening. If you open your Bibles, open to the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk. And while you are searching for Habakkuk, I want to tell you what a pleasure it is to be here with you. It is such a blessing to be among people that have been my teachers for so many years of my life. Some of you have taught me how to sing tenor. Some of you have taught me a little bit about construction work. Some of you have been so many of you have been my Bible class teachers and moms, and just lovely people who have given me such a good upbringing, and I thank you. And it's good to be here. It is very strange to be here, though. Very strange to be here, and be here without Brother John Sanders, be here without Mrs. Rutherford, and of course I know she's not been in your presence for a while, but some of those faces that it's so strange to be here and not to have some of those rocks among the group here. But this is also a pleasure to see. There are so many new faces and new soldiers that take up the ranks as others have passed on. We are in an eternal kingdom, one that does not end when this life ends. And we need to have all the energy that we can to be placed into the work of the Lord, because we go to an eternal kingdom, something much greater than what we have here. And I pray that this work will continue to thrive, continue to be a light in this community until the Lord comes. But thank you for the work that you do here. And thank you also for the support that you give to me and give to my family for the work that we do there in Philadelphia. I wish all of you could just go up there to Philadelphia and meet all the brethren up there. It's a good group, and look forward to telling you more about it on some other occasion. But it's a good group, lots of work to do, as there is here, so many places in the world. But it's good to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity that you give to me to speak before you and talk about the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk is not only hard to find, it's hard to say. What is this prophet about? And then maybe that you guys have read about Habakkuk soon or recently. But it's always good to come back to this book and to find what is its message. These are minor prophets that have major messages for us that we need to hear time and time again. Habakkuk is a prophet that prophesied about the time of captivity, or right before the Babylonian captivity. And we can know that by some of the clues that we see while he's prophesying. He tells of this great destruction that's going to come, and it's going to come in his lifetime, God says. And so he is prophesying during a time when captivity is going to come. The destruction of Jerusalem is going to come. And why is the destruction of Jerusalem coming? It's because there's wickedness. There's idolatry. And not just idolatry, but there's also violence, injustice. And God has reached his limit. And so he's going to come in captivity, or come in destruction, and take away his people from Jerusalem into captivity as a punishment. And you know the rest of the story. But Habakkuk is living during this very dark time. And so he complains to the Lord. He says in Habakkuk chapter 1 and verse 1, he says, "The oracle of Habakkuk, the prophet beheld. How long, O Yahweh, will I call for help, and you will not hear? I cry out violence, yet you do not save. Why do you make me see wickedness and cause me to look on trouble? Indeed, devastation and violence are before me, and there is strife, and contention is lifted up. Therefore the law is ignored, and justice never comes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, therefore justice comes forth perverted." Can you see the despair in Habakkuk's voice? He's complaining about violence around him. He's complaining about perversion around him, injustice around him. The more I think about it, the more it sounds like Philadelphia, or maybe even San Angelo, really any place that you live in this world. It's just we live in a world that is just filled with violence, and you have to lock your doors nowadays, and you have to lock your cars, and you worry about what people are going to do to you and sue against you, and you go to the law, but even going to the law, things turn out twisted and perverse because even our officials are twisted and perverse. And so Habakkuk is worried about this. And he cries out to God, but this is the worst part. What he's worried about is not just that there is violence and that there is injustice, but why isn't God doing anything about it? I'm crying out to God, but God's not doing anything about it. Where are you, God? How long, O Lord? We could do a whole study about that phrase, how long, O Lord. So often in the prophets, there are Christian saints that are asking this same question. It's not a bad question. How long do we have to go through this? How long are you going to make us look at this injustice and this difficulty? How long? Where are you, God? The interesting thing about the book of Habakkuk is that not only do we have these words that are coming from the heart of Habakkuk, that maybe are words that ring true with us, that are words that we could even say, and say they're directly from his heart. But in fact, God answers Habakkuk. And he says, well, let's just read what he says. He says in verse 5, "See among the nations and look. Be astonished, be astounded, because I am doing something in your days. You would not believe it if it was recounted to you. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans, and a bitter and hasty nation, who walks on the breadth of the land to possess dwelling places which are not theirs. They are dreaded and feared. Their justice and exaltation come forth from themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, and sharper than wolves in the evening. Their horsemen come galloping, their horsemen come from afar. They fly like an eagle swooping down to devour. All of them come for violence. Their horde of faces moves forward, and they gather captives like sand. And they mock at kings. Rulers are a laughing matter to them. They laugh at every fortress and heap up dirt and capture it. And they sweep through like the wind and pass on. But they will be held guilty, they whose power is their God." What is God? How does God respond here? Well, first of all, he has a note in verse 5 that says, Habakkuk, don't think that I'm not doing anything. You prayed about this, and I am working. I'm working behind the scenes. And even if I told you what I was going to do, you wouldn't believe it. But I'm going to do something in your lifetime. You are going to see it in your days. And so here it comes. I'm going to pull away the cloth, and I'm going to reveal to you what I have planned. I have sent for the Chaldeans. I've sent for my soldiers, in other words, and they are going to come in, and they are strong. And the rest of this speech that he gives to them just tells us how strong they are. Wow, they come in and they come on horses. They come in and they leave no captives. They come through. Oh no, they sweep up people like sand, captives like sand, and they laugh at kings. They come through and nobody can stop them, in other words. Nobody can stop them. They come through and they leave destruction behind them. You ask for help, I'm bringing my cavalry. How would you respond to this? Because do you see what's going on here? Habakkuk says, I have a problem with my neighbors. I have some problem. There is injustice around me. There is violence around me. Just things are going bad in Jerusalem. And what does God say? Okay, I have a plan. I'm going to destroy it all. Whoa, wait a minute. It would be like, you complain about, things are getting really bad in San Angelo. There's violence on this side of the town and on this side of the town. There's like violence everywhere. And God, do something about this. And so he says, what? I don't know. He says, I have a plan. I'm going to bring the Russians in. And the Russians are going to drop a nuke right on the middle of Goodfellow Air Force Base, and it's going to obliterate all of West Texas. How's that sound? This is a little much, right? It's like killing a fly with a hammer. This is too much. But this is what God's saying. Habakkuk has a small problem. It's a big problem. But God's looking at this, and he says, this is a bigger problem than you understand, Habakkuk. There's a bigger problem than just violence that affects you, injustice that affects you. This is a problem with a people that have not repented. And so therefore, I am bringing my forces, and they are going to come, and they are going to sweep through, and there will be nothing left over. Habakkuk responds in verse 12. He responds very timidly. He describes to God himself, wait a minute, God, do you understand who you are? Of course, God knows who he is. But he said, look in verse 12, he says, are you not from everlasting, O Yahweh, my God, my Holy One? We will not die. You, O Yahweh, have placed them to judge, and you, O Rock, have established them to reprove. Your eyes are too pure to see evil, and you cannot look on trouble. Why do you look on those who deal treacherously? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than they? That's a key verse in verse 13. He's asking, wait a minute, you're going to call the Chaldeans to come and solve this problem? You know, I have problems with my neighbors here in Jerusalem, but at least they believe in God. Well, some of them do. And now you're going to call the Chaldeans to come in, the Babylonians to come in and destroy us? How is it that you can be just and righteous God and allow this? How do you allow how can you be silent when those who are wicked swallow up those who are more righteous than they? I mean, just look at them in verse 14. You have made men like fish of the sea, like creeping things without ruler before them. The Chaldeans, all of them come up with a hook and drag them away with a net and gather them together in their fishing net. Therefore, they are glad and they rejoice. Therefore, they offer a sacrifice to their net and burn incense to their fishing net, because through these things their portion is rich and their food is fat. Will they therefore empty their net and continually kill nations without sparing? Are you going to let them continue on? You're going to destroy this and allow these even worse oppressors to go on? It looks like they're just taking everyone. How do you allow this, oh God? Habakkuk says, first of all, chapter 1, I don't understand. God says, let me tell you why. And now he responds, Habakkuk responds, I really don't understand. I don't understand how God will allow this. But then I love the attitude of Habakkuk in chapter 2 and verse 1. What does he say? I will stand on my guard post and station myself on the fortification. I will keep watch to see what he will speak to me and how I may respond when I am reproved. See, Habakkuk knows that he doesn't understand. He's complaining to God, which is a good thing. He's expressing his doubt. He's expressing his discontent with God and what's going on here. He's crying out to the only one who can save. But now that he does this, he says, God, hit me again. Tell me again, what do I have wrong here? Give me an answer. And again, the blessing comes because God gives him an answer. Chapter 2 and verse 2, God responds again, and he says, Then Yahweh answered me and said, Write down the vision. Write it on tablets distinctly, that the one who reads it may run. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It pants toward its end, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it. Though it will certainly come, it will not delay. For it will certainly come, and it will not delay. Basically, I'm about to tell you what I'm going to do, and it will come. You can bank on it. This is something that is sure. what's going to happen. In verse 4, here's a summary of how all this is going to end. Behold, as for the proud one, and I think he's talking about Babylon here, because later on, the rest of this chapter is going to be talking about woes against Babylon and woes against this nation that are dealing out destruction to others. But he talks about this proud one. As for the proud one, his soul is not right within him. But here's a contrast. But the righteous will live by his faith. That's an important, very important line. If you have a yellow highlighter and you want to highlight that, that's a really good thing to highlight. But the righteous will live by his faith. It's so important, in fact, that 3 times in the New Testament that phrase is quoted. One time in Romans, one time in Galatians, one time in Hebrews, to talk about the type of faith that we need to have as Christians, as New Testament Christians. Even today, the righteous will live by his faith. The righteous will live by trusting in God, listening to him, understanding that he is the only one who can save. In verse 5, he says, indeed, the wine betrays the haughty man so that he does not stay home. And he enlarges his appetite like Sheol. He is like death, and he is like death, never satisfied. He also gathers himself all the nations and assembles to himself all peoples. Here is Babylon bringing all peoples to himself, getting really, really rich. Verse 6, will not all of these lift up a taunt song against him, even satire and riddles against him, and say, woe to him who increases what is not his? For how long? And makes himself rich with loans. Will not your creditors rise up suddenly, and those who make you tremble awaken? Indeed, you will become spoil for them, because you have taken many nations as spoil. All that is left of the peoples will take you as spoil, because of the human bloodshed and the violence done to the land, to the town, and to its inhabitants. So he begins this long, he calls it in verse 6, in my version, it calls this a taunt song or a satire, where he's going to go through and he's going to pronounce all these woes. Woe to Babylon, woe to Babylon. The first one is, woe to you who have been unjust. You've gathered yourself riches, but really these are all kind of loans. These are loans, and the creditors are going to come sooner or later, and they are going to take back what belongs to them. In verse 9, here's another woe. Woe to him who is greedy for evil gain in his house, to put his nests on high, to be delivered from the hand of evil. You have counseled a shameful thing for your house by cutting off many peoples. So you are sinning against your own soul. Surely the stone will cry out from the wall, and the rafter will answer from its framework. How have you built your house? You've built your house with violence. You built your house by putting other people down. You've built your house not looking for graciousness, for justice. You're just looking out for yourself. The result is this great nation, this wonderful nation and powerful nation. But this house that you have built is crying out about the injustices that you have done. It's going to fall on your head. In verse 12, woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed, who founds a town with injustice. Is it not, behold, from Yahweh of hosts that peoples toil for fire, and nations grow weary for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge and the glory of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. Verse 14 is an interesting verse, all in the middle of this taunt song. He's taunting Babylon and taunting him for talking about the destruction that's going to come down on Babylon. However, at the same time, what is going to be the result? It says that the knowledge of the glory of Yahweh will cover the world as the waters cover the sea. I think this is a messianic prophecy, talking about a time when people will recognize all over the world who God really is. Really, the prophets over and over talk about this idea that many nations will stream to Mount Zion, and they'll be a part of this great kingdom, that kingdom that we are part of. And it talks about then the idea, this knowledge of the glory of Yahweh that is going to be pronounced, that even in thousands and thousands of miles away in a town called San Angelo, Texas, they're going to be talking about God. That's pretty amazing. Even here, after so many years, here and all over the world, God's glory is being declared. Woe to you, talking to Babylon again in verse 15. Woe to you who make your neighbors drink, who mix up their venom even to make them drunk, so as to look on their nakedness. You who fill with disgrace rather than glory. You who drink, now you yourself drink and expose your own nakedness. The cup of Yahweh's right hand will come around to you, and utter disgrace will come upon your glory. For the violence done to Lebanon will cover you, and the devastation of its beasts. By them you will be terrified, because of human bloodshed and violence done on that land to the town and to all its inhabitants. So in all of this, it's saying that Babylon, you're going to have to drink the same cup. What you have dished out to other people, you're going to have to do this. You're going to get destruction as well. And by whose cup? By whose hand? It says in verse 16, the cup of Yahweh's right hand will come around to you. This is the cup of wrath. And they're going to have to drink of it. And they are going to pay the price of their sin. It says in verse 18, what profit? What profit is the graven image when its maker has engraved it? Or the molten image, a teacher of lies? For its maker trusts in his own making when he fashions speechless idols. Woe to him who says to a piece of wood, awake, and to a mute stone, arise. And that is your teacher? Behold, it is overlaid with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all inside it. But Yahweh is in his holy temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. I think so often growing up, that verse 20, I always got this idea, well, this is a verse that you read right before you get together for the assembly, and so everybody, let's be quiet because it's time to worship. That is not at all what this verse is talking about. It's a good verse. But in the context, what is he talking about? It's this contrast with, here are these graven images who have what kind of power? They have no power at all. You made the thing. Of course it doesn't have any power. You covered it in gold, you set it up, and this is your teacher? Woe to him who says to the piece of wood, arise, awake. There is no breath inside it, he says in verse 19. But what is the contrast? But Yahweh, the Lord, is in his holy temple. It is a show of his power. And he is exactly where he needs to be. When he is in his holy people, he is on his throne. He is in his seat of power, and he has all power and control. And what does the earth need to do? Let all the earth keep silent before him. Out of reverence and respect for who he is. Fear him who is powerful and able to destroy. That goes for all of his enemies, but it also goes for Habakkuk. It goes for all of the world. It goes for Habakkuk because Habakkuk, it's not that he needs to keep silent verbally. Just be quiet. It's the idea, know that God is working. Know that God is in control. And what is so amazing to me about this passage is to understand what is going to happen to God's holy temple. And what is God promising that he's going to do to Jerusalem in this book? I'm going to destroy Jerusalem. I'm going to destroy my temple. But you know what? The Lord is still in his holy temple. It's not about that building. It's about where God dwells and where he is in control. And there's nothing that can change that. It's such a powerful verse for us to go back and say when we are having just difficult times and trying to figure out which way is up. No, the Lord is in his holy temple. And let us keep silent before him who is in control. Chapter 3 ends with I say a psalm because it's a psalm. It begins in verse 1, a prayer of Habakkuk, the prophet, according to the, I don't know how to pronounce this, Siganoth or something like that. And you can go look that up, and there's other places in the book of Psalms where you have this same, maybe it's a tune, maybe it's an idea, maybe it's an instrument, but there are other psalms that use this idea. In fact, at the very end of this book, there's a quick note in verse 19, for the choir director on my stringed instruments. So what is this? This is a song. It's not in the book of Psalms, but it is a psalm that is meant to be sung by the people who are in Jerusalem at this time, by the captives who don't understand what is going on and where is God. Let us sing this song. What is this song about? Well, read with me in verse 2. First of all, he declares the might of Yahweh. O Yahweh, I have heard the report about you, and I fear. Yahweh, revive your work in the midst of your years. In the midst of your years, make it known. In rage, remember compassion. So this is not the description of Yahweh yet, but he begins by talking about just what God is doing here. He first of all talks about the report that he's heard about Yahweh, and how does Habakkuk feel about this? He's afraid. Well, isn't that normal? If God says, I'm going to come and I'm going to destroy your house, and I'm going to rip the people from their homes, all of your neighbors are not going to live here anymore. That would be a frightening thing, wouldn't it? And where are we going to live? What's going to happen? I heard the report and I fear. But he says, oh Yahweh, revive your work. Be at work, O God, in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make it known. And this last phrase is amazing. In rage, remember compassion. I know your rage is coming. But let that same hand that shows rage and power be the same hand that shows compassion and grace and mercy. Here comes God in verse 3. God comes from Teman, and the Holy One from Mount Paran. His splendor covers the heavens, and the earth is full of his praise. His brightness is like the sunlight. He has rays flashing from his hands, and there is the hiding of his strength. Before him goes pestilence, and plague comes after him. He stood and measured out the earth. He looked and startled the nations. So the perpetual mountains were shattered, and the ancient hills collapsed. His ways are everlasting. I saw the tents of Cushan under wickedness, and the tent curtains of the land of Midian were trembling. Did Yahweh's fury burn against the rivers? Or was your anger against the rivers? Was your wrath against the sea, that you rode out on horses on your chariots of salvation? Your bow was laid bare. Rods were sworn unto battle by word. You split the earth with rivers. The mountains saw you and writhed, and downpour of waters passed by. The deep gave forth its voice. It lifted its high its hands. Sun and moon stood in their lofty places, and they went away in the light of your arrows, at the brightness of your flashing spear. In indignation you marched through the earth. In anger you trampled the nations. You went forth for the salvation of your people, for salvation with your anointed. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked to lay him bare from thigh to neck. You pierced with his own sharpened rods the head of his throngs. They stormed in to scatter us. Their exaltation was like those who devour the afflicted in secret. You tread on the sea with your horses, on the surge of many waters. We don't have time to go through all of these words, But this is just an amazing description of our God. That's one of the things I love about the prophets. There's just so many different ways to look at God. Here's this God who comes and he is full of what? Full of wrath. Full of pestilence. Pestilence goes before him. Destruction goes behind him. He is the one now coming in destruction, not Babylon. He is the one coming to show who is boss, and all the nations quake under his feet. He has horses. He has a bow. He has his mighty flashing bolts of lightning in his hand. Those are amazing descriptions of our God. But what is he doing? He's destroying. But the promise here as well, in these verses, he says in verse 13, the end is that God is doing all of this. He went forth for the salvation of your people. For the salvation with your anointed. What does that word anointed mean? What is that word talking about? Well, of course, in the Old Testament, kings were anointed, right? Saul was anointed. He was the first king of Israel. David was anointed after he became the king of Israel. Solomon, and then all of the kings were anointed. And this is this ritual that they received, this pouring olive oil over their head to show that they were the chosen ones of God. They were the anointed ones. And then, of course, in the Old Testament, when you want to talk about the anointed one, the word that you use is the Messiah. And when you get to the New Testament, which is written in Greek, instead you talk about the Messiah, the anointed one, as the Christ. See, what Habakkuk is doing is he's looking forward to this time that even though right now things are falling apart, and he doesn't see how is this going to work out in the end. But he looks ahead and he knows that God is in control. And God is going to come for the salvation of his people like he's promised. And he's going to come with his Messiah, who is going to guide his people to victory. And even though Habakkuk does not know his name, it is Jesus who is written all over this. What an amazing section, where Habakkuk is looking forward to the day of salvation. But it's not there yet. And look at how Habakkuk ends his psalm in verse 16. Even though he can look forward and see the salvation that's going to come, and this is such sweet victory that one day God is going to bring to his people. In verse 16 he says, I heard, and my inward parts trembled. At the sound, my lips tingled. Decay enters my bones, and in my place I trembled, because I must wait quietly for the day of distress, for the peoples to arise who will invade us. That messianic hope is a long way off. And so in the meantime, Habakkuk's going to have to go through some hard things. But he's going to do what? He's going to wait quietly. Why? Because the Lord is in his holy temple. And God told everyone, let all the earth be silent before him. He's going to remain quiet, remain calm, as he waits for this invading army, the Chaldeans, to come and destroy his home. Look at the brutalness of the description in verse 17. Though the fig tree should not blossom, and there is no produce on the vines, though the yield of the olive should fail, and the field yield no food, though the flock should be cut off from the fold, and there is no cattle in the stalls. Just everything is just destroyed. It's like after a hurricane, you go through and all the shops are just completely just bare. It's like COVID. You remember COVID? You go into all of the shops and it's just there's nothing in there. And I can't buy anything. You remember those feelings of despair. What is going to happen? Well, here's Habakkuk. And there's no rebuilding after this. There's not even cattle in the stalls. The streets are empty. What does Habakkuk do? Yet, in verse 18, yet I will exult in Yahweh. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. Yahweh, the Lord, is my strength, and he has set my feet like hinds' feet and makes me tread on my high places. For the choir director, on my stringed instruments. What a book. What an amazing, these ideas that Habakkuk shares with us. He's sharing just this difficulty that he's going through and calling out to God just from the depths of his heart. I hope that these words can be helpful to us in those moments when we are too asking why. Why? Why? Or how long is God going to allow this to happen? It may be that we don't like the answer that God is going to give. But in the end, God calls us and asks us to trust him. Because the righteous, they will live, they will be saved by their faith, by their trust in him, not in themselves. Trust me. Put your faith in me. So often we run to whatever secular thing that we run to the doctors, run to insurance, we're looking for safety. And I know those are good things. Go to the doctor, please. But it is the Lord who carries this world in his hand. He is the one who will save in the end. And if we have turned our back on him, to whom will we go? If someone's turned his back on the Lord, when this moment of devastation comes, it is a devastating day. But it's so wonderful to be able to look at Habakkuk in this day where he calls it this day of distress. Seems like a very small way to talk about this, a day of distress, this day of anguish, day of sadness, day of destruction. But in this day, he says, I will tremble before the Lord. I will exult in Yahweh my Lord. I will rejoice in the God of my salvation, because He the Lord, is my strength. I pray that tonight you'll take courage from the book of Habakkuk, that you'll look at these words and know that God is the only one who can save. If you've strayed far from Him, or even strayed a little bit from Him, seek Him out. Turn to Him, because in Him we have salvation. In Him He has promised. It's from the Lord that He has sent forth His salvation for His people. There's this mighty, amazing warrior cry that God lifts up, and here He comes with His anointed, with His Christ. Don't you want to be a part of that? Don't you want to be on the winning side? God is waiting for us. Will you turn to Him? I hope you will. Let's think about these things as we stand and sing this song that was selected.